All right, so function-wise, PL versus Cal, what you want to keep in mind is as we discuss the different nuances that different or what do I want to say? If we the different patterns or stems, what effect they have, what function they have. Keep in mind that the clues that we're giving you and the prompts that we're giving you on these differences, these are very rudimentary. And as you continue to develop in your understanding of Hebrew, you're going to learn different nuances. So the primary key that we give you for the PL as far as how it influences meaning, and there's two kind of categories that you have to think of. One is going to be unaffected meaning, which basically means it doesn't really change the meaning at all. It just so happens that there are certain words that don't have a cal form. Their standard form is to occur in the PL. They don't really have a cal version. That would be, for example, davar. Davar doesn't really, I think this is a good example. I'll have to double check myself. I don't think davar occurs in the cal. I think its basic form is the PL. So if that's the case, then there's not really a difference in meaning between the cal and the PL because there is no cal. That's one category, this sort of unaffected meaning. Diber is just the default form of the Dalet Beit Resh root. Now, again, I'm about 80% sure that davar does not occur in the cal, but I'm feeling very unconfident in that right now. So I could be
Fair.
wrong. But I will tell you that, for example, oh man, I'm almost positive that Hillel is this way, and I'm pretty confident that Hillel only occurs in the PL. So with that understood, you shouldn't be adding any sort of inflection to the meaning of those words. Now, if you do have a word that appears in the cal, it occurs regularly in the cal, but it also happens to occur in the PL, then it's legitimate to ask the question, why would someone use the PL versus the cal? In that situation, the very rudimentary difference that we tell first year students is that the PL tends to convey a more intensive version of the verb, so that if I have something like shavar, which means he broke, and I put that in the PL, it would be shiber. Shiber wouldn't mean he broke, it would mean he shattered.
Oh,
It's like a more intensive version. And
yeah.
so that's the basic sort of rudimentary idea that we give you of the PL. It is far more complicated and far more nuanced than that. But if you can just take that as an anchor, as like a pigeonhole to kind of put this little cubby that you can put the idea of the PL into, we can then start to branch off from that. So there are
Okay.
going to be times where if you're, in a Hebrew exegesis course and you come across some word in the PL and you intensify the meaning of the verb, that may not be the best thing to do. But at this level, that's all we're asking you to do so that you can kind of get the next step toward better learning the PL. So don't worry if your translations seem funny or weird or whatever. Don't worry if you look it up in the English Bible and it has a totally different meaning. Right now, we just want you to associate the PL form with, for those verbs that have a cal form, we want you to associate the PL form with intensification or maybe like repetition or something like that. It's just sort of an elevation in the action. All right.
Okay.
That is the basic idea. And if you take second year Hebrew, you will learn the different nuances and different possibilities there. But if you can hang on to PL indicates intensive action, that's going to get you a long way. That's basically all we're going to ask you to know about the PL in this course. But again, you got to keep those two categories in mind. That intensive action only applies to verbs that do occur in the cal where that would indicate that the author made some sort of choice in choosing the PL form over the cal form. If it's a verb like he lail, that doesn't occur in the cal. The author doesn't really have a choice. Halal is not a form that he's familiar with. He's picking the PL form because it has sort of become the default form.
Okay.
All right, anything else before we jump in?
One more question that I think I know the answer to, but it's going way back and maybe even from last semester, but I wanted to verify it.
Sure.
As I'm looking at, and this is the case in any paradigm, but I'm looking at the PL paradigm here and studying it in the back of the book. There are times when the prefix or the suffix are exactly the same. So like in PL, imperfect third feminine plural is the same as second feminine plural.
Yeah.
Like it looks exactly the same.
Yes.
I am guessing that you determine what it is based on the context of the sentence and the gender and number of the other words in the sentence.
That's right. And to just sort of give you an illustration of that, so let's go to the paradigms here, and let me pull up just the cal regular here. Okay, so that would basically be the same as when we look at the imperfect, and you're looking at PL, but this occurs in the cal as well. Yeah. The 3FP form and the 2FP form are identical. So are the 3FS form and the 2MS form. Those are identical. And then if you go over to the perfect, we don't learn two separate forms of the third person plural in our paradigm because they're identical. We just learn this as third common singular, or I'm sorry, third common plural. But all that really means is it would be like if you came over here to the 1CP or the 1CS in the imperfect, you could list out one MS and one FS, but they would be the identical form, and so we only list one of the forms. The reason why they've listed two separate forms here, here, and I am sharing my screen, right? Yeah, okay. The only reason why they list two separate forms here is because it's jumping from third person to second person, and it could get confusing if they don't. So there are certain forms where they're going to be identical, whether it's one in conjugation or another, and the only way to know how that should be translated or how that should be parsed is by context. Now, what that means is if you don't have any context, if you're just given a word, you need to be aware of all the possible parsings for that word.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say that you might get a break on the quiz where if you just give me one, that might be sufficient. But I'm saying for your sake, learning Hebrew, it is important to be able to list all of the possible parsings rather than just one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense.
All right, well, let's take a look here. I think it was 27 or maybe 28 and 29. 28 and 29. Let's see here. Let me pull up the actual assignment somewhere. I just had it. There we go. All right, so we did... Oh, that's 12. I don't want 12. Let's see, 28A, B, C, D, and then 29A, B, C, E, F, G. Okay. It's quite an assignment. All right, let's see here.
Yeah, who assigned that?
I know, right? Well, it wasn't me, I'll tell you that. They have these courses pre-programmed. But yeah, this is a lot of material to cover. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to emphasize what I think are sort of like the tricks or maybe the sneaky things that I want to make sure you're aware of.
Perfect.
Because obviously you've got the answers in the back of your book, but I'm just going to point out kind of the clues that I think are helpful.
Okay, yeah, that's good.
All right, so looking at section A here, it tells me already focus on the form of PL, so I'm going to assume that what I'm looking at is PL. And as I go through here, the things that make it clear that I've got a PL is, first of all, I recognize a perfect conjugation because it has a suffix but no prefix. And in the perfect, the PL is going to have a hierarch in R1 and a dagesh in R2. If I'm in the third person, of the cal perfect, I expect a sere vowel in R2. But if I'm in the second or first person, that's going to be an A class vowel, a patach here. So perfectly normal. This is a PL. It makes sense, and that tav hierarchiode ending tells me it's cal perfect 1CS. The root being davar. If I look at number 2, I've got, and this, again, just a couple of them. I'll kind of work through that methodology of parsing that I've done before, where if I have no clue what I'm looking at, but I'm pretty sure it's a verb, I can say, or I can ask myself, how many letters should a Hebrew verb have? 3. How many do I have? I have 4. Which of these 4 letters is most likely to be added to the root as opposed to part of the root? For example, resh is not likely to be added as a suffix. Resh doesn't get used that way. But yod frequently is added as a prefix. So that's going to tell me that the most likely situation is I've got a prefix conjugation or imperfect conjugation here. Now, in order to determine the pattern, I used to just be able to say, oh, well, it's cal because that's all I've learned. But now I've learned PL, so I have to ask myself, is this PL or is this cal? And when you're in the imperfect, there's a real easy way to tell. The real easy way to tell is your prefix letter is no longer going to be Hirik or Patach or anything like that. Your prefix letter in the PL is going to be a reduced vowel, either Shava or something like Hatef Patach, Hatef Segel, Hatef Kamet, something like that. It's going to have some sort of Shava in it, if not a Shava. So that right there tells me that I'm dealing with a PL. I can confirm that by looking at the R1 vowel, which is a patach in the imperfect, and by looking at the R2 dagesh. Those both confirm that I'm in the PL, but as that my most reliable sign in the PL imperfect is going to be that prefix vowel, which is reduced, or a shavah here. So that's an easy way to tell right off the bat. Now, I still have to parse it out. I still have to figure out what is the person gender number. And in that case, I just do what I've always done. Yod in the imperfect indicates third masculine. If it has a suffix on it, namely shurik, then it's plural. If it doesn't, then it's singular. So that's pretty easy to parse. And then my root becomes kof, pe, resh. Kafar, and I don't say kafar to mention specifically the cal form, because I don't think kafar occurs in the cal, but just that's my way of pronouncing the root kof pe resh. That kof pe resh root would normally in the cal mean something like, well, kafar itself, I think Futato gives you the meaning atone. And I actually need to look this up because I think there might be a more general meaning here, and it's probably good for me to, instead of just telling you something that you're going to find out is wrong, I might as well take the time to look it up here. I'm looking up kafar in my lexicon, my Halot lexicon, which is a more thorough one. Here we go. Kafar. All right, so the first entry is going to mean to smear or to wipe off, to cover. It can mean, okay, it's got a pretty wide range of meaning.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure this is the entry that we're learning here. Yeah, the second entry is related, but it's certainly not the main one. So this first entry, this is what's important, because Futato is going to give you a word like atone, and like, for all you know, that's what kafar means every time it appears. But kafar actually, and it does occur, it looks like it does occur in the perfect, or I'm sorry, in the cal, and in the cal it means to smear. It specifically occurs in Genesis 6:14, the flood narrative, and there it's the word for, like, it means to cover the ark with pitch. So the word kafar is used there, but in the PL, it means either to cover, to smear, to appease, to make amends, to cover
Wow.
or to avert, to make atonement. So it can mean, a lot of these are related, to cover sin, to not count against, to make expiation. So a lot of those are related to atonement, but you just want to be aware that the meaning can be a little bit broader than that. All right, good
Yeah.
enough. I'm not as
Cool.
upset with Futato, or yeah, with Futato as I thought I would be. Okay, so if we were to translate this again, because kafar only appears once in the Cal, um, it's probably not one of these words where we want to intensify the Cal to come up with a PL meaning. There are going to be some words where Futato is going to give you a specifically Cal translation and a specifically PL translation, and the difference between those two won't always be intensification. When he gives you a specifically PL translation for that verb, use that. But if you don't get there are going to be a lot of verbs that we've learned so far that he's not going to give us a PL meaning for. In those cases, that's when that intensification element would be appropriate.
Okay.
All right. So, for example, take a word like echal. Echal means he ate in the Cal. If you see echal in the PL, which I have no idea if it ever appears in the PL, but echal in the PL might mean something like devour. Whereas in the Cal it means eat. In the PL it might mean something like devour. That's the idea of intensification there.
Okay.
All right, so continuing on, number 3 here. Again, when I see a prefix and a shava, I immediately know I'm in the PL. Now I have to pause there and of course make an exception. There's another form we're going to learn called the pual when we learn passive forms. The pual is the same as the PL. It's just a passive form of the PL. So instead of he will atone, which would be the meaning of yekaper, the pual form would mean he will be atoned or something like that. If devar, well, you can't really passive speak. The word, I guess, yeah. So if devar means he spoke, and, well, yeah, this would be the perfect PL. So here we've got devarti would be I spoke. The pual form, you would need something like the word to be the subject, but the word was spoken. Pual would be that passive idea. And pual also will have this same beginning, but instead of the A class vowel or the I class vowel in the perfect, it's going to have the U, which is why you go from PL to pual. You get that U sound. So all that to say, that's kind of pre-learning for later on. When you see the shava or the hatef vowel in a prefix, right now that should tell you this is definitely PL, but eventually it could either be PL or pual. We'll learn that later on. So again, I see the shava, I know immediately this is PL. The mem is going to tell me it's a participle. So this is a PL participle. Participles don't have person, but this does have gender and number, which would be masculine singular. We get down here to number 4. Again, I don't have a prefix, but I do have a dagesh in R2 and an A class vowel in R1. Now that looks a lot like an imperfect PL. It doesn't look like a perfect PL. Perfect PL would have a heric, an I class vowel in R1. So what in the world's going on here? If this is the imperfect letters, patak in R1, dagesh in R2, why doesn't it have a prefix? Well, the infinitive construct and the imperative both use the imperfect conjugation. They just remove the prefix letter. So that's what we have here. This is going to be an imperative 2MP form of the PL Hilal. All right, so that's kind of where now we have to worry not just about conjugation. Is this perfect, imperfect, imperative, infinitive? We also have to worry about, is this cal or is this PL? So in some senses, the pattern is the easiest. Oftentimes, the pattern is what I recognize first. The first thing I notice about this is that it's PL. But once I've established that, I still have to go through the same questions to find out, is this perfect, imperfect, infinitive, imperative, that sort of a thing. So we've been told that these are all PL, which is great, but it's also important to recognize what is it about these that make them PL, and then go into our regular parsing where we determine conjugation, person, gender, and number. All right. So let's see here. Number 5, again, prefix with the schwa, easy. That's a PL. Prefix tells me, though, that it's also imperfect. And the tav prefix with a hirik yod suffix tells me specifically that it's 3fs, which means my root would be beit, kof, shen. Number 6, we've got dibar tem. That tem is a cal perfect 2mp suffix. The PL is reflected in the R1 hirik and the R2 dogish. Remember, R1 is hirik in the perfect, patak in the imperfect. Number 7, we've got, again, we've got the R1 hirik, so this is going to be a perfect version of the PL. But the fact that I have a hirik tells me PL. That's confirmed by the R2 dogish. So this is going to be PL perfect, 3CP. Number 8, we've got it's a little bit trickier here, but I've still got a prefix letter with a schwa. So I immediately know this is PL imperfect. And then the noon also tells me that it's a 1CP, because that's the letter that gets used in the prefix for the 1CP. Number 9, we've got bakesh. Now I've got an imperfect vowel pattern, patak plus I can ignore the sere, but I've got a patak in R1, which hints at the imperfect, but I don't have a prefix. So that means this must either be an infinitive construct of the PL, or it's an imperative 2ms of the PL. Number 10, we've got the imperfect sort of look, but again, it's a participle. That mem schwa prefix always is going to indicate either PL participle or pool participle. And then the hirik yod mem tells me I've got a masculine plural form. Number 11, we've got a prefix. We've got an aleph prefix with a reduced vowel. Again, this isn't schwa, but it is a hatef patak, which is reduced. So this aleph tells me so many things. It tells me that it is imperfect. It tells me that it is 1C. Actually, it's not imperfect. I just realized we've got a comet's hay on the end. So this isn't imperfect, this is cohortative. But the aleph here indicates that it is, the aleph plus the comet's hay indicates cohortative. The reduced vowel indicates that it is PL. So we've got a PL cohortative 1CS. Number 12, we're looking here at, again, we've just got 3 letters, but we've got a patak in R1. And patak in R1 is indicative of a PL in the imperfect family. So this is probably one of those PLs that has lost its prefix, either an infinitive or an imperative. So this is either a PL infinitive construct of kiper, or it is a PL imperative 2ms of kiper. My guess is it's infinitive rather than imperative, because I think if this were imperative, we would probably have the sere here. Number 13, we are looking at, let me double check right quick, make sure, yes, okay. And let's see here. All right, number 13, we've got that tav prefix with a schwa. So again, I know it's PL imperfect. The tav prefix with no suffix indicates 3fs or 2ms. And then my root would be beit, kof, shen. Number 14, we've got this perfect looking form of the PL. That Hiric in R1 tells me I've got a PL perfect. Dogish in R2 confirms that it's PL. And then my Tav Kamet suffix tells me it's PL perfect 2MS. So my root would be Kof Dalet Shen. And then finally, number 15 here, we've got another Tav prefix with a Shava prefix vowel. So that's going to be a PL imperfect. Tav prefix with a Shurik suffix is going to indicate 2MP, and so my root is Dalet Beit Resh. Any questions about A before we move on to B?
No, and actually, I'm going to have to head back to work here
Sure.
in just a moment. No, this is really helpful. So I either missed or hadn't caught on until you started going through these. I was always just looking for the strong dagesh to indicate PL. I missed the whole vowel change issue.
Right, and that's probably because I went through the same thing in first year Hebrew. It's probably because the dagesh is sort of like the thing that gets your attention first.
Yeah, so easy to spot.
Yeah, the problem is, as you're probably learning either this week or next week when we get to second gutturals, if that second root letter is a guttural, there won't be a dagesh.
Right.
And so the dagesh isn't as reliable as the prefix vowel and the R1 vowel. That's why I use the dagesh as confirmation of the PL, but again, it won't always be there.
Yeah. Okay, this has been very helpful. Thank you so much for doing this on a busy week for you.
You bet. I'm going to keep going through these. We'll post the video for those who watch later, but if you do run into any other questions or anything, don't hesitate to let me know.
Will do. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care, Jason.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
All right, so moving through the rest of these here, we'll look at B. B is going to be mixing the cal in with the PL. So now we got to pay a little bit more attention. So number one, again, I see a prefix and I see a Hiric. That immediately tells me that this is not PL. PL will be reduced. It'll have a Shava in there somewhere. So I know this is cal imperfect. Yod, no suffix, indicates 3MS. Number two, I've got a yod, but I've got a reduced vowel. So that tells me that this is a PL imperfect. And that R1 confirms that it's PL, and R2 dagesh confirms that it's PL. So we've got a PL imperfect. Yod with no suffix tells me 3MS. Dalet Beit Resh is my root. Number three, I don't have a prefix because hey is not used as a prefix here until we get into some other conjugations. So I know I'm in the perfect, and I don't see any signs of the PL. If I'm in the perfect, R1 should be a Hiric, but here R1 is a Kametz. That would be a cal perfect, and the Tav Kametz indicates 2MS. Number four, I have a very similar form, but I do get those signs of the PL. R1 is Hiric, R2 is dagesh. So this is PL perfect 2MS. Number five, looking at this, I don't see a prefix. So I can't tell whether or not it's imperfect. I guess I could say I can tell it's not imperfect, but it could still be infinitive or imperative because those two forms don't have the prefix. But as I continue to look here, I see a Shurik. Well, that tells me right there it's not going to be infinitive construct. Could it possibly be a imperative 2MS? What would the difference between an imperative 2MP? What would the difference between an imperative 2MP and a cal perfect, I should say cal imperative 2MP, and a cal perfect 3CPB? Well, if this were a cal perfect, R1 would be a Kametz. So this is going to be a cal imperfect, not imperfect, cal imperative 2MP from Shafat. Number six, we've got R1 is going to be a patak. That is a sign of the PL. Now, it's not a sign of the PL in the perfect. In the perfect, the sign of the PL is an R1 heroic. But here I've got an R1 patak. That is a sign of a PL imperative or a PL infinitive. The shuric here tells me it's imperative 2MP. So we got PL imperative 2MP from Devar. Number 7, I've got a mem shava. That tells me right away I've got a PL participle. I have no suffix, so it's going to be masculine singular from Kof Dalit Shen. Number 8, I have a holum R1 vowel and a sere R2 vowel. That tells me I've got a cal active participle. No suffix indicates 3ms. Number 9, I've got a tav prefix with a shava prefix vowel. That tells me right away that I've got a PL imperfect. All right. So what is my person gender number? Well, the tav with a shuric is going to indicate 2MP. So I have a PL imperfect 2MP form of kafar or kiper. And then number 10, I've got a bait at the front. So I have to figure out what to make of this. Is this bait going to be a prepositional bait on an infinitive? Is it going to be a prepositional bait on a participle? Or is the bait part of my root? If it's part of my root, I've got an R1 heroic and an R2 dogish. That would make good sense of bakash, which is a root that I know, being a PL perfect, and then tem would be my 2MP suffix. All right, let's take a look at C. Here we've got third hay verbs in the cal, and I can't remember if I went over this in this class or not, but third hay verbs, we understand that a third hay verb can do a few different things depending on what you're adding to it. If you add a vocalic suffix, well, that's not the first one here, so let's just take what the first one is. The first one, we've got baka, and we've added a consonantal suffix. When you add a consonantal suffix to a third hay, that third hay is going to shift to a heroic yod. That's what we've got here. So this is baka with a new suffix that's going to be cal perfect 1CP of baka. Number 2, when you add nothing to the third hay in the imperfect is going to shift from a comet's hay to a segel hay. If it's imperative, it will be sere hay. If it's infinitive construct, it'll be holum vav tav. If it's participle masculine singular, it'll be segel hay. And if it's infinitive absolute, it will be sere hay. So the third hay verb is going to have different forms depending on what conjugation it is. And then again, when you add something to that third hay, for example here, we've added a vocalic suffix, heroic yod mem. Now you might look at this and think that we've actually added a consonantal mem, and that's why it shifts to a heroic yod, but mem isn't a suffix here. Heroic yod mem is the suffix. And so here we've added a vocalic suffix to the third hay. The third hay just drops out altogether. It doesn't shift into another letter, it just drops out. All right, number 4, we've got ra'ot. This would be that example of third hay in the infinitive construct shifting to holum vav tav. And this is why it's so important to remember the different forms that a third hay will take depending on conjugation. It's because as soon as you see this holum vav tav, you can recognize that this is an infinitive construct of a third hay verb. You don't have to worry about whether it's a feminine plural ending. It is possible that this could be a feminine plural ending of the participle, but the difference here is the infinitive construct has the shava letter in R1, whereas the participle would have a holum in R1. Number 5, we've got yiglu. Yiglu here is going to be a third hay verb where the third hay has dropped out because of the vocalic suffix. And then number 6, again, third hay, asa. drops out because of the vocalic suffix. 7, this is going to be an example of the imperative or infinitive absolute of bana, because we've got the sere. Again, as soon as I see this, I see sere, which tells me it's either imperative 2ms or infinitive absolute. Number 8 here, we've got baku. So again, I've got an imperative shava, but the third hey has been replaced with the shuric suffix. So this is going to be cal imperative 2mp form of baka. And then number 9 here, we've got kalot. Again, the first thing I see is the holam vav tav. That tells me infinitive construct. That's confirmed by the shava in R1. So this is going to be an infinitive construct form of kala. And then number 10, we've got nata. I add the tem consonantal suffix to the third hey. It shifts to a hirik yod. All right, let's take number 4 here for translation. Remember, in the process of our translation, we're going to expect the first word to be a verb. All right, so we get va eshma. Va eshma. Now here, excuse me, the difference between a vav relative, or vayiktol form, and a vav conjunction, which would just be vayiktol, is a little bit confusing because we don't have the patak dagesh. But remember, the reason why we don't have a patak dagesh here is because aleph can't take a dagesh. And so as a result of losing the dagesh, the patak has to lengthen to a kametz. This is a vayiktol form. This is a vav relative form. If this were just a vav conjunction, we would have vav, shava, aleph, segel. Okay? So this is still a vayiktol form. It's just when we put it on the 1CS form, we have to use the vav kametz instead of the vav patak dagesh. All right, so we know that we've got the vav relative. We also see that we've got the aleph prefix, which is going to be 1CS. And so we can just translate this. Shema in the Cal Perfect 3MS is he heard. Here in the imperfect 1CS, it would be I will hear, except the vav relative is going to invert that back to past time. So this is I heard. All right, I heard what? Kol. Voice. I heard a voice. Midaber. Okay, we see midaber here. Mem, shava at the beginning. That tells us we have a Piel participle. All right, so this verb is doing something. All right, it's a participle. The voice is doing something. What is it doing? Well, the verb is diber, for speak. So I heard a voice speaking. The amor, so again, we've got another vav relative here, but because of the aleph, we don't get the vav patak dagesh, we get the vav kametz. I heard a voice speaking, and I said, this is the 1CS form of amar, I said, mi ata. Remember, mi means who. Mi ata, who you. In Hebrew, they don't need a verb here, who are you, but in English we do. So who are you? Vayomer, and it said, Eli, it said to me, Ani Adonai. It said to me, I, Yahweh. I am Yahweh. I am Yahweh. Elohecha, your, the cha here, the echa is your God. Ha, we've clearly got a definite article here. Hey, patak dagesh, but we've got a mem shava. That tells me I've got a PL participle. So I am the Lord your God doing something. The fact that I've got a definite article here tells me this is attributive. So back up here, this was, well, I guess it does match. This could still be attributive as well because there's no article on the participle, but there's also no article on the noun that it's modifying. So cancel what I was going to say there. So I am the Lord your God, and this is attributive, who does something. What does he do? Well, the verb here is kiper, who atones. I am the Lord your God who atones, lamed, 2 or 4, all of what? All of that which, all of which you have done. Asita. This is asa, third hey verb. Now, my program is missing the hirik here, but there should be a hirik here. The tav kametz ending is 2ms, cal perfect. You have done all what you have done, all that which you have done. So I am the Lord your God who atones for all of what you have done. All right. Pretty straightforward there. I think that's it for 28. Let me double check the A, B, C, D, and then now we're going to go to 29, which is going to be the same thing in the weak roots. And there's actually more to do on 29, so let me take a look at what's different here. You're going to do E and F and G. All right, so, whoops. A, B, C, skip D. All right, so A, again, same thing, excuse me, same thing as before. We're just now in weak roots, okay? So we're still looking for the same diagnostics, but they're going to be a little trickier now because we've got some weak letters. So for example, in a standard strong cal perfect 3ms form, which is what we have here, I'm sorry, not cal, in a standard strong PL perfect 3ms form, we would get kisei with a sere. But in the perfect conjugation, third hey verbs end with a comet's hey. And that's why we get kisa instead of kisei. We still have our R1 hirik and our R2 dagesh, which are both diagnostic of a PL perfect. All right, and it's 3ms. But because it's a weak verb, a third hey, in the perfect, third hey comes out as comet's hey. Number 2, we've got beirech. Now this would be a good example of a PL perfect, but the difference between PL perfect strong and PL perfect weak, which is what we have here, this is a 2 guttural. PL perfect strong would be something like keet tail. We'd have a hirik in R1, dagesh in R2. But here, resh can't take the dagesh. And so because we lose the dagesh, our R1 hirik lengthens to a sere, and we get beirech. Number 3, we've got pretty much a strong verb. The only difference between this and a strong verb of a PL imperfect is that in most imperfects you would get a holum or a patach on the lamed. Here you get a segel because third heys come out as segel hey in the imperfect. Number 4. Excuse me. Number 4 here, we've got a pretty good example of a PL imperfect 1CS. The difference between this and a strong verb is that we've got a guttural in R2, so we lose our dagesh again. And here, our R1 patach, to compensate for the loss of the dagesh, lengthens to a kametz. All right, number 5, we've got mikhasim. This is going to be a PL participle indicated by the mem shava. And we've got a hirik yod mem suffix that tells us this is masculine plural. But our root, all that's left is kof and samek. The hey has disappeared. Well, we've learned that in a third hey verb, when you add a vocalic suffix like hirik yod mem, the third hey is going to drop off altogether. So we've still got for the PL, we've still got our reduced prefix vowel, our patach R1 vowel, and our dagesh in R2. Number 6, again, mem shava tells us that we've got a PL, or later on we'll see pual, but right now we've got a PL participle. Barach is going to be our root, and then the holum vav tav tells me feminine plural. What's the difference here between a strong PL participle and this weak one that we see? Well, again, R2 is weak. It's a resh. It can't take the dagesh. So we would normally see a patak in R1, but that patak has now lengthened to a kametz. Number 7. Here we've got gilinu. This would be a PL perfect. But because it's third hey, the third hey is going to shift to hirik yod when we get a consonantal suffix. Number 8, we've got beirachnu. Beirachnu. The difference here between between a PL perfect in the strong form and a PL perfect, 1 CP here, in the weak form is that this resh can't take the dagesh, and so we would normally have a hirik in R1. That has lengthened to a sere. Number 9, this would normally be, this is going to be a PL, this could be a PL infinitive construct, but it can also be a PL imperative to MS. The difference between a strong version and this weak version is that the resh loses its dagesh, and so what we would have here as a patak, it gets lengthened to a kametz. And then number 10, same thing. This is specifically an infinitive construct, because whenever we see a holam vav tav, we need to start thinking that this is an infinitive construct of a third hey. It could be something else. It could be a feminine plural ending on a participle, but if that's the case, we're going to have a holam vowel in R1. Here we have the patach of the PL infinitive construct. We've got the dagesh of the PL infinitive construct. All right, let's look at, okay, so here we looked at PL and weak roots. Down here, we're just mixing in some strong roots. So this is going to be the same thing. It's just going to have some easier stuff added in. Let's look at C. Focus on the difference in meaning when a verb occurs in both the cal and the PL. Like I talked about before, the primary thing, if a verb can appear in both, the primary idea is going to be to add some sort of intensification. Now, there are going to be times when Futato specifically gives you a PL meaning. A good example of this would be safar. I can't remember which is which, but safar has different meanings in the PL and the cal, and they're not necessarily linked to intensification. Let me pull that up here. Put this over here. Let's look at safar. All right, so safar in the cal means to count. When we go into the PL, it means to report or to tell, or you might say, if you want to link count in the cal, you could say to recount, not recount as in like count again, but recount as in like recount a story, to report something. Now that is recount, but I mean in the specific sense, not of counting again, but of telling again. That's what the PL form means here. So you can mean both to count a second time, but it can also mean to recount as in like to tell again, to announce, to report, that sort of a thing. So through count, you can keep those linked. Intensification, if you're counting and then you intensify that, that doesn't necessarily mean you count more intensely in the PL. This would be more the idea of reiteration. So to do something repetitively. That's another nuance of the PL form, okay? Good enough for now. Let me close that out. All right, so if samachu would mean something like they, I think samak means to rejoice. I got to check that now. But if that's the case, then simchu, simmechu would mean something like to rejoice intensely, I guess. I'm not sure what he would give there. Let's actually go look at the answers here. We're in 29C. He's going to say they are glad or they rejoice. Oh, okay. So this is what we refer to as the factative. When you have a verb that's stative in the cow, a lot of times the PL will make it into a causative. So if samach means they are glad, that's stative, then simech or simach is going to mean they made something glad. So the cow would be the stative, the PL would be the causative. Now this might get a little bit confusing because later on we'll learn the hifil, and the hifil also has a causative effect, but it does that not on stative verbs, but on action verbs. Okay, so both the PL and the hifil can have a causative effect. They made someone glad. The hifil does that for action verbs like eat. Hifil for eat would be they made him eat. The PL has the causative for stative verbs. So if Gadol is he was great, then the PL form, Gidale, might be they made him great. Something like that. All right. So that's going to help you pull out the difference in the nuance between one or the other. Let's see. We skipped D and we went to E. D, E. So this is more parsing. This is mixing in the cal now, in addition to the PL. So the difference, you should pretty easily recognize PL, Hirik Dagesh. Here we've got, this is going to be PL as well because, I'm sorry, Zakain is a stative. I saw the sere here. If this were PL, it would either be Hirik in R1 or Patach in R1 because Kof can take the Dagesh, and so it would have one if it were PL. This is going to be Cal stative. Hallelu here. This is going to be, and you may recognize that, Hallelu. This is the imperative to MP. You all praise or give praise. And then if you add Yah, which is short for Yahweh, to the end, it would mean give praise to Yahweh. Give praise to the Lord. That's where we get the word hallelujah. Hallelujah. Praise Yahweh. All right, but here you can see R1 Patach, R2 Dagesh. That indicates that we've got a PL, and this happens to be imperative to MS. Yismach here, we've got a cal because cal imperfect because our prefix is not reduced. Number 5, we've got a PL imperfect because our prefix is reduced. Number 6, we've got a PL infinitive construct because our R1 is Patach, Dagesh and R2. Number 7, we've got a cal active participle because R1 is holum, and then we've got a holum vav tav feminine plural ending. Number 8, we've got a PL participle because we've got a mem shava. And then number 9, we've got a PL perfect because we've got an R1 Hirik, R2 Dagesh. And then number 10, we have a cal perfect. This is third hey. Third hey shifts to a Hirik yod when you add the consonantal suffix. Boom, bam. All right, let's take a look at one translation here. We'll do number 2, I guess. Vayehi kekalot. So again, when we begin with vayehi and an infinitive construct that has the preposition on it, this is a time setter. This is setting the time, a temporal clause, all right? So if you translated it literally, it might be something like, and it happened that when finished the prophet, so when the prophet finished, to speak. But if you translate it this way, you don't want to translate this as a new clause. You don't want to, that is to say, you don't want to translate and here, okay? So you could say, and it happened that when the prophet stopped to speak or stopped speaking. This is good. Is this he stopped speaking? That is a complementary infinitive. Or is this purpose? He stopped in order to speak. That's a good question because I think lamed can indicate both complementary infinitive and infinitive of purpose. So it could go either way. Futato translates it as a complementary when he finished speaking, which would make sense in the context. But to translate and it happened that is completely unnecessary. You can just start with, this is setting the time in the past. It's an imperfect haya with the vav relative, so that indicates past time. So then you can just translate, when the prophet ceased speaking or stopped his speaking. Here we've got nifal. We've got the noon assimilated into the pay. This is a 3MP, yod prefix, shurk suffix. They fell. Who fell? Ha'anashim, the men fell upon Pneihem. So Pnei is going to be faces of them. Fell upon their faces. And they wept. Baka. This is a little bit tricky because you see the dagesh here. So you might think it's Piel. But it can't be Piel because the yod has a hirik. And that indicates cow. So why do we have the dagesh here? This is not a strong dagesh. This is not the dagesh forte of the Piel. This is a dagesh that occurs in a begad kafat letter when it's preceded by a silent shavah. Okay? So vayiv ku, this is not a doubling dagesh. This is just a begad kafat dagesh. If this were not a begad kafat letter, there would be no dagesh here. So, and they wept, and they arose, vayakumu, they arose, and they said, vayomeru, they said, chatanu, we have sinned me'od, we have sinned greatly, or we have sinned very much. All right, and then finally, let's take a look at Joshua 2 through 3. We've got Evid. Oh, and these always get a little screwy on my, I think this is out of order. So I'm just going to go to Joshua 2 or 22:2 in my Hebrew. All right, so let's just look at the full verse. We've got Vayomer, and he said, Alehem, and he said to them, Atem, you all. Atem shemartem. You all have kept or guarded. Guarded what? 8. Kol asher, you all have guarded all that or all of what? Tzivah. Tzivah is Piel. All of what he commanded you. So commanded whom? He commanded. Who did he command? You all. So he said to them, and again, we don't know who he is here from this verse. He said to them, you all have kept what? Everything that he commanded you. That who commanded you? That Moses commanded you. Moses who? Moses Eved Adonai. Moses, the servant of Adonai, commanded you. So he said to them, you all have kept what? Everything that Moses, servant of Yahweh, commanded you. And You you heard or you have heard with or by koli, by my voice. You have listened. Shema lamed indicates you have listened to. By my voice to everything that I have commanded you. So verse 2 here is saying, you all have kept everything that Moses commanded you, Moses, servant of Yahweh, and you have listened to everything that I have commanded you. Verse 3, Lo azavtem. So azav is to forsake or to leave behind. Do not forsake. Oh, I'm sorry. No, this is perfect, not imperative. You have not forsaken. Forsaken what? Achechem. Ach here is brother, probably. It's a weird form. Your brothers. Goodness. Come on. You have not forsaken your brothers this many days. So this is basically saying for many days, but it's this period. Not these many days, but this period of many days. Odd means like as far as or until. So even up to today, up to the point of today. These many days until today. Or I should say until this day. And ushmartem, you have kept what? Mishmeret. So mishmeret here, this is you have kept mishmeret. Mishmeret is basically what you keep. So what do you keep? You have kept your duty. You have kept your responsibility. You have kept your guard, something like that. You have guarded your guard, something. You have kept what you're supposed to keep. Mitzvot. Okay, so this is going to be construct. You have kept what you're supposed to keep of the command, or of the mitzvah is going to be, commandment, of the commandments of Adonai, your God. Whew. It's quite a translation passage there. So, hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions or anything, send them my way. I hope you're having a great week, and we'll shut it down and see you next time. Thanks.